Hello and welcome to the first ever recorded, second aired episode of The Rest of the Fucking Owl, a podcast about the mess it takes to create. In this episode, I get to interview Alice and Morg of the Classics Department. They're two of my latest artistic influences whose immersive theater pieces have broadened my imagination and challenged my very identity. Our conversation gets into some juicy and profound subjects like creative crisis, psychoactive theater, and the importance of being offended. I really enjoyed making this one, and I hope you enjoy listening. Here's the Classics Department. So I'm going to kick this off. This is my first time ever recording one of these episodes, so you're my official first guest. Welcome.
Yay!
Wow.
We're the deflowerers.
Thank you so much for deflowering my podcast. So I'm here with the Classics Department, which is Alice and Morg, and this is like a very fresh take on many different things that you probably haven't heard about before. We're going to be talking about immersive theater, which when I tell people about, most of them go blank in the face for a minute. But welcome. Could you maybe introduce yourselves?
I'm Morg,
And I'm Alice.
and we are the founding members of the Classics Department.
And how many other members are there?
It's just us.
Technically, it's just us, but we have
we
many.
work closely with a variety of collaborators, often
Mhm.
recurring ones. Shout out to Duncan Horst, our muse.
Mm-hmm.
Duncan's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, I echo that shout out. Yeah, and how did you become the Classics Department? What's the story of you first working together?
Well, it all started with Vibe Camp, really. Technically, that was when it started, although we've known each other for a very long time, such that by the time we first collaborated on Vibe Camp, it didn't really feel like it was our first time collaborating.
Cool.
But we were enlisted to bring chaos to Vibe Camp in 2023 via a chain of chance connections. And little did they know we were actually, I think, really the perfect people to execute on this because we had connections to the Vibe Camp community and understood their culture and lore, and had done scrappy things for underground parties many, many times before. But this was definitely our biggest project up to that point. I mean, I remember that week at Vibe Camp was like, in terms of physical exertion, just the most difficult week of my life, hands down. It was so difficult.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you were sick.
And I was also sick. Yeah.
I definitely want to come back to the difficulty of that launch. It's like the subject of this podcast, basically.
Mhm.
But also, I'm curious about how you explain immersive theater to people. You probably have twice the practice I have at trying to tell people what this is.
Yeah, it's not that easy. Do you have
Yeah, it's not that easy. I mean, I usually say, have you seen Sleep No More?
Mhm.
And most people I talk to have either heard of it or seen it.
In New York,
And
at
Sleep
least.
No More, well, even in the Bay, a lot of people
know what it is.
People kinda know
even
what it
outside
is,
of New
yeah.
York.
Cool.
it definitely popularized the genre.
But then the thing about using Sleep No More as a touch point is that it is really only one form of immersive theater, and immersive theater can take many different forms, many of which are far more interactive than Sleep No More,
Mhm.
which is what we try to do. We try to make our work heavily interactive such
Mhm.
that the audience is truly engaged and truly being challenged and stretched to some kind of limit.
Yeah, and that kind of interaction isn't even allowed at Sleep No More for most people unless you're like really invited into something unique.
Yeah,
for people who
it's-
haven't seen Sleep No More, it's just like imagine spreading the theater around an entire building and you're chasing the audience or you're chasing the actors around to try to watch all the scenes. And other than that, it kind of has the same rules of participation where like you don't talk, you don't interrupt, you don't like make anything different about the scene.
Yeah, it's effectively an installation piece with moving dancers.
Yeah.
But it's some people even argue that it's not actually immersive theater for that reason.
Hmm.
It's certainly immersive, I would say, but it's not interactive.
Right.
And we try to do things that are far more interactive.
Yeah. Could you give an example for a newbie of like what interactive experience looks like with y'all?
Yeah, well, one of the things we did at Vibe Camp was Omega Mystery School, which people described as authentic relating on steroids, authentic relating in like a David Lynch inspired cabaret.
Yeah, it was this bohemian cabaret run by, well, fictionally by a cult of sort of romantic spiritual renegades who were training people to develop psychic powers so that humanity could outcompete AI. That was the concept.
And we basically, so one of the things we do a lot in the classics department is to like remix genres. We're very genre bending, and one of the genres that we typically remix into our performances, which lend them a great deal of interactivity, is like things like authentic relating that already have a bunch of interactivity in it. So for Omega Mystery School, we had like a sequence of authentic relating games that directly tied into the plot, and the more participants played these, the more the plot was propelled along to this enigmatic apotheosis. So that's one example. That was like, I would say in terms of the interactivity, that was really special because I was one of the ritual assistants during the performance, and I was like kind of walking around the participants, making sure they were doing okay and kind of like helping them with some of the exercises. And I've like never seen an audience so drunk before, drunk on collective effervescence. People were just intoxicated, and they were doing the exercises, and they were getting kind of like not only more and more into them, but more and more interested in like transcending their own preconceived limitations of what they would actually do in a theater piece. And I think that's like our ultimate objective. And we kind of come from the world of like social experimentation and experimental partying, whatever that really means. But like we want to push people a little bit past their comfort zone with love and with style. And I think Omega Mystery School was a good example of that.
It totally was. Yeah. That was my first encounter with y'all's work, and the first time that I met Alice. And well, specifically in the lead up to Omega Mystery School, the way that you did intake was the first way that I met you. You were in a blue veil. You read my mind. You like interviewed me for the mystery school, and I was so glad I got in.
Yeah, the way to get into Omega Mystery School was you had to solve a secret puzzle at the end of a matchmaking survey. And then you would find a URL that invited you to Omega Mystery School. But then you had to come and find me in person at Vibe Camp and give me the secret password. And yeah, so it was all this like had this like ARG element to it.
I loved that. It was so cool to have the story start long before we entered the theater. It was like it was weeks, or I guess a couple of weeks before the thing happened. I was already like solving a cipher and like trying to figure out how much of this was an intended fiction and how much was like somebody being serious. And then I met you, and I was like, okay, well, you're doing the bit, but you're doing it really well. I love the commitment, so let's go. And then you gave me a pin and a secret message and like, burn this, don't tell anybody. And I was like, this just like, it's meeting a bunch of fantasies I had as a kid of being part of like a secret club or a spy society or something.
I know. That is our goal. We want to tip people off the ledge of the mundane.
Yes. Yeah, it immediately did that.
And we want to, we want to transport people through a portal.
Yeah, and to do that, we need to take our own work and the conceit of it super seriously. We really don't hold anything we do at any kind of level of safe irony, even though it can be incredibly over the top sometimes. But when we're working on it, like we really mean it. We really mean what we're doing. That's why I always call Omega Mystery School a semi-fictional cult initiation, not a fictional cult initiation.
Yeah, I did really feel like I was putting up like my actual identity. Actually, this is a really funny, like, personal biography for me. That was such a pivotal experience because I had planned for like 2 years before this to change my name from Rob to Hart, because like my last name's Hart, but I just wanted to use it as my first name for a long time before that night.
Right.
And the first exercise in the entire drama was writing our own name tag. And I wrote Rob on my name tag and put that on, and I immediately felt the like inner friction of like, I've just self-labeled with something I wanted to do away with. And then the very next exercise was like putting on our blindfolds, standing up and shouting our name into the audience, like all of us at once shouting our own name. And the thing that came to my lips was heart. And I was like, I think I just changed my name. And then you said, tear off your name tag, tear it up, and throw it over your shoulder. And I was like, yep, I just changed my name to Heart. Like, that was the massive movement in my biography. And like from then on, I met a whole bunch of other people that same weekend. And anytime that I was like, handshake, my name's Heart, right away people connected with my name and knew me as I wanted to be known. And I was like, that's really cool that I was like, I don't know, just impelled to make that switch in the midst of this drama. It felt like it wasn't merely a fiction for you or for the audience. Everyone was going through it as themselves, but like really in a container that they could play more freely. And I remember being aware of all of the ingredients you were cooking with. I had done authentic relating games before. I had been in a cabaret that I wrote. I had, done all of these kinds of, but putting them all together the way that you did was entirely novel for me. And it had a completely psychoactive effect. Everyone there, like you said, was like drunk on effervescence and probably not much else. I didn't take any substances before, but I felt high the entire time. It was awesome.
Yeah. Being able to create these magic containers is a skill that we're still developing. I mean, I think Alice is really good at like holding these magical containers that make you feel like you've stepped into a different world. And I know that like facilitators, there's the whole world of like retreats and like you said, authentic relating, and they're really, really good at creating these containers. And I've only recently come to appreciate how powerful that is. And we really want to port that into our work to have people cross a threshold and suddenly feel permitted, but not over permitted to do different things and possibly even change their names or, I don't know, engage in like a different range of behaviors than they're used to.
And the show that we're working on now, I think may very well like challenge us to bring that to even higher heights and create even more pathways for the audience to really transform and perhaps even be undone in the animal void. We'll see.
Wow.
We'll see.
Well, I'm definitely interested. Sign me up for that show. What can you say about it that wouldn't spoil the surprise?
It's called Psychomagic 9, and it's inspired by The Holy Mountain by Alejandro Jodorowsky.
Which I just watched last week for the first
you did?
time.
Really?
Walked out of, hated it. Yeah.
You hated it?
Hated it, yeah.
Interesting.
Now I want to watch it again. And not
You
just
walked
because you
out?
just said it.
You
but
walked out?
I walked out, yeah.
That's
I walked out
interesting.
during like the Planet series. It was like right when
Yeah.
they were introducing Neptune, and I was like, I'm so done with this.
That makes sense. I mean, it was my 19-year-old boyfriend's favorite film, and it still definitely has that vibe of like it's every 19-year-old male film snob's like favorite film.
That's perfect. Yeah.
And so I sort of snubbed it for several years for that reason, but then returning to it in more recent years, I actually during COVID I was addicted to this really stupid phone game, that one of the ones that just like pulls money out of you in this horrible way, because it was COVID and I was like lonely and bored. My friend rented a theater and screened The Holy Mountain, and I walked out of that theater. I deleted the phone game and I never installed it again.
Wow.
And I was like, you know what? This film is actually a lot more powerful than I realized.
That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
Could you like line up what the connection was? Like how did it impel you to delete a phone game?
It's a little hard to explain without seeing the film, or it's a little hard to explain even if you have seen it. But I mean, the film is about like taking the personality, this kind of personality that gets shit out of us based on our conditioning and merely the influences of the environment we're raised in, and turning yourself into gold. And alchemy is a major theme in the film. And the characters basically go on this very difficult journey where they shed their identities, and they ultimately, well, the end of the film is a little bit ambiguous, but they ultimately find something that is more than everyday life or beyond it. And I think that, just being reconfronted with that possibility and that wish was really profound at that moment when my whole life was just being like locked in an apartment in Boston with nothing to do.
Yeah, and there's something about the tone of the film and the tone of the filmmaker who Jodorowsky also stars in the film as the alchemist. So he's kind of like intimately telegraphing his message both as a filmmaker and also as the star. There's something about his tone and his like desire for everything to be real and meant sincerely on some level, even though he has a lot of like trickster energy, is probably what affected you, because there are a million films that are kind of about this, but most of those films are about that. They're not that thing. And I think Jodorowsky really tries to make, I mean, like, his intention, as pretentious as it sounds, is to make films that actually impact people in this way that Alice is describing. And I think that's what makes him such a lovable character, is that he has these grandiose ambitions, and often they fall flat, as when he tried to make Dune. When he tried to make like a 15-hour version of Dune. But the fact that someone is trying, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, that phrase from The Big Lebowski, the dude abides. You know, just the fact that the dude abides kind of gives you a lot of comfort. It's sort of like this like security blanket in the collective unconscious of like cultural symbols. I think Jodorowsky also occupies, he's also tending to his own little psychic space of like, yes, we can believe in magic insofar, or like believing in magic will actually make miracles possible, specifically the miracles of like changing yourself, which can often feel so difficult.
Yeah, and the show that we're working on now is about this, the tension and conflict between like Jodorowsky's kind of perspective of like not holding anything ironically and like wanting to go completely all the way with alchemical transformation and like pure poetry. And so like that on the one side, and then on the other side, like making art that's accessible and even commercially viable. So there are two characters in our show that represent these two poles who are having an ideological battle that the audience is swept up into and becomes a part of.
Yeah, and Jodorowsky is very he's, even though he doesn't hold things ironically and he holds them in a sacred way, he's not like an, I don't know. I can understand why people find him pretentious, but to me, he's not pretentious because he's always like so sly and winking about everything he does. Like, he knows it's over the top. He knows that it's like grandiose, and he's still winking at you. And so that to me, I think, kind of saves it from being like just a monument to ego. Yeah, even though it is a little bit that too, but that's also, that's part of why he's lovable. That's part of why Duncan will do such an excellent job channeling him.
Yeah, and Jodorowsky was heavily influenced by the spiritual teacher Gurdjieff, who was famous for administering shocks to his students. So he would, you know, there wasn't one particular way he would administer a shock, but he knew his students, he understood them, and he would kind of like find some way to just freak them out or sort of just set them like totally like off guard so that their sculpted, manicured personality had a chance to like break and for some kind of essence to come through. And I think that's what a lot of Jodorowsky is looking to do, is to deliver a shock and leave you feeling confused and maybe a little bit mad. But it's kind of through those cracks where something a little more real is invited to emerge.
Yeah. Which, this is interesting. Feel free to disagree, but I feel like this is something you and I may have in common, is that I administer those shocks to myself through making art. I'll pick a project because I know it's stretching me beyond what I'm comfortable with and overlaps with that thing I want to see more of in the world. And I'm like, well, if I just wanted to see more of it, but I felt already perfectly capable, I would actually kind of leave that thing to someone else, and it wouldn't feel as inspiring to me. But when I know that something's going to shock my system and force me to like grow a new limb, then I'll go and try that thing because I'm like just pursuing a transformation. And the experience of that is like part of my reason for even being in the arts. And I kind of catch a whiff of that with you too when we worked together on Om Nom Nominous. It seemed like you even like conceived of the show as a way of kind of shocking yourself out of some cycle or into a new one.
Yeah, I do. I think I pretty much always feel that way about the things that I work on. I think most creators do.
Mhm.
You know, you always hear about how like writers always say like the second novel isn't easier than the first. It never gets easier.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I do think that there's a lot to be said for administering shocks to oneself through these kinds of processes. I think there's also some limitation on it because a shock that comes from you cannot really be a full shock in some sense.
Yeah, it's like you're leaning into some chaotic element that will shock you, but like you just devise the art to make you encounter something you're not.
Well, yeah,
in
and you're
control
still the
of.
one who set up the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree. I think because these projects are so large, like I think you can set into motion something that like you're no longer exactly in control of. Or you might be in control of it ostensibly, but it'll still have like these externalities. Like it still takes on a life of its own. It becomes this like, you know, like this many-headed creature.
Yeah,
and
that is true when
that
you're working with
many-headed creature can
collaborators.
definitely administer shocks.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think even with a novel, I think you can get this even with a novel. Like,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
like, and there's also like the fact that any art put out into public is going to garner, it's going to stretch you to your limits. Or, I mean, like, you know, if you're really putting everything into it, it's going to stretch you to your limits, and then that's going to tell you something about yourself.
Mhm.
I mean, I know that I experienced this with the dating show, kind of. Like, I just, like, had a big crash after that, and, like,
The dating show
that
was another
that was
large
like a
project
big
we're
shock.
doing.
That was
Mhm.
that was one of
Yeah.
the like the largest shocks to my system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The dating show was probably the biggest project we've ever done, and certainly the biggest project we've ever done in terms of budget and reach.
Mhm.
We were hired by a startup in San Francisco called Manifold Markets to put on a one night show for their audience, for their fans.
Which this was kind of a sequel or a adaptation of the Vibe Camp dating show,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it was,
Okay.
but it was we totally rewrote it and changed basically everything about it. But it was inspired by the Vibe Camp dating show,
Mhm.
and yeah, it was really really tough. One thing that Morgan
Especially
and
on
I,
the timeline.
Yeah.
I mean, we were like on a like 2-month timeline.
yeah,
Which is just totally insane.
I feel
Mhm.
like in earnest, we like the first 2 weeks were us just like getting the venue, and then it was really just 6 weeks to like make the entire show pretty much from scratch.
And it was like
Yeah.
a musical. It was an existential drama that was also a musical that also had prediction markets and was also a live reality dating show.
Yeah.
It was also like improv comedy the whole way
This is
through.
what I mean.
Yeah.
This is what I mean by genre bending.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I loved that about its ability to like combine so many different things I loved and didn't know they could fit in a chimera. And like the proof that it could work was like kind of a repeat of my experience of the Omega Mystery School. I saw that show and was like, okay, one of the takeaways is I just changed my name, and the other big takeaway is I know what kind of art I have to make now. Because I had just written a cabaret, and I had felt like that's kind of it, but kind of not it. And the thing that's missing is I don't feel like I'm activating anyone.
Yeah.
The audience were just passively sitting there, like taking it in, and I was like not satisfied with that. And then I saw the way that you composed OMS to get everyone actually participating and driving the show and like discovering themselves. And I was like, yep, that's what I have to do. That would feel so much more satisfying. And then I saw the dating show and then the live stream of the other dating show and felt like, okay, now I see several other things I want to cook with. And one is this improv constantly. It was just like, that is the ultimate surrender in my mind. Like you're really leaving it open to the elements, letting the audience change it, letting these like contestants in the game show change it. Like it is not any longer like a controlled, like this is my baby kind of thing. What was that like for you, like personally, to like watch that thing like leave your control?
The dating show, or yeah,
Bet on Love.
Bet on Love.
Bet on Love.
Well, it didn't feel that like out of control. I mean, Duncan is an incredible improviser. He was the host of the show and also played a character. He played the new CEO of Manifold Markets, and his stooge was his blood boy.
Our beloved Tom.
Our beloved
beloved
Tom, and
Tom.
they had like a little bit of like a, you know, high status, low status comedy duo going, like a bit of a clown duo. And we had rehearsed The two narrative scenes in the show, and we had rehearsal of the songs naturally. Like, the songs were pre-written, they weren't improvised. And we had rehearsed like the challenges, or like, you know, not the actual content of the challenges, but like how Duncan would deliver them. And then everything else, like, you know, we still, in a lot of our work, we have kind of like a short but fertile devising stage where we start off with like a beat map of everything that's going to happen in the show, or like the beats that like the performers need to hit. And then we just give it to them and we embark on this little devising odyssey. And we're pretty lucky to be able to work with people who are like not only really wonderful improvisers, but also just sort of like creative geniuses in their own right. And so they can just take the beat map and they download it and then they regurgitate something out that's like just scintillating and coruscating with 1,000 colors. That's way better than anything we could, you know, the dialogue wise, it's way better than anything we could have written. And then we work from there and we try to like not belabor it, in part because, well, we haven't had time to belabor it historically, and also just to keep it fresh. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say that it gave us the feeling of like I didn't feel like it was like totally out of my control. Mm-hmm. But there were some really juicy moments during the show that were unanticipated. And I think one of the beauty of doing this kind of thing is that like often the rehearsals just kind of suck. Mm-hmm. They suck and they're flaccid and they're limp and they're kind of like falling apart and you're like, oh my God, what have I done? And that's the part where you feel like it's totally run away from you and it's never coming back and you really fucked up. You're going to be humiliated in front of 300 people. But then the show itself is just magical because the improvisers like soak up the energy from the audience and just reflect it back in beautiful and unexpected ways. And I think the moments in Bet on Love that Duncan surprised us with, there were probably a few more in Dating Show to Save the World, which was the Vibe Camp show. But in Bet on Love, there was like a moment where he was like riffing on Eliezer Yudkowsky and he goes like, Hail Yudkowsky. And he makes everyone in the audience do like a Hail Yudkowsky. I think
and
that
then
wasn't in rehearsal,
sure somebody
right?
tweeted this at Yudkowsky eventually and he's like, I don't know who these people are.
Yeah, so there are some funny moments like that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know what you're talking about with the like rehearsal, the contrast between rehearsal and performance with an improv-based show like that, where it just doesn't have any of the energy running through it yet that it's going to have on show night.
It's like unplugged from the current.
Mm-hmm. It's like trying to predict how that thing's going to run when you actually light it up with like audience participation it's a guessing game. Mm-hmm. Did you find it easier to do that the third time than the first time, like having a set that wasn't yet animated by the audience?
I don't know if it's really getting any easier.
It was harder. I think it was harder we get more ambitious each time, so it becomes a little bit more difficult each time. Yeah. Yeah. I think it was also more difficult for Bet on Love because we had like fewer liberties with like a rehearsal schedule. We had to do light and sound. We teched it all like the night before and the day of. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Huh. I'm like comparing this to shows I've done that felt really ambitious, and then when they happened were like actually like really self-managed and went really smoothly, and then other ones where I thought like, yeah, this is going to be really smooth, and then in the midst of it I was like, I am like juggling 18 balls right now. I don't know how this is like still like running. What was the biggest surprise for you around Bet on Love? Like,
just, I mean, partly that it came together and partly that it even existed in the first place. The fact that it existed in the first place is like sort of no one knows why, including the people who hired us. I mean, like, industrial musicals used to be a thing, right? Like in the 50s.
Yeah, industrial musicals are like custom musicals for a company. And then we found after Bet on Love that like these musicals, like usually the conceit of the musical that it was like several years in the future when the company now kind of like owned the whole world, which was exactly what our conceit for Bet on Love was, but we
But you independently came up with that.
Independently came up with it. I mean, I guess it's natural if you're being hired to like advertise something, then you're gonna like propagandize it to the stars.
Yeah, and you've got to do it to the level that you can wink at the audience, like, hey, here's
Right,
the propaganda.
right. Exactly. That is a really good way to put it. Yeah. Yeah, but they used to do, like, industrials in the 50s were a thing where, like, you know, Kleenex or, like, a mop or vacuum company would hire a professional theater company to put on a musical about, like, the Kleenex.
That's
for its employees usually.
Yeah.
I've grown with like a bit of like, that's adorable. Like, I'm like, imagine how cute it is to sit in a Kleenex boardroom and be like, we should hire a theater company to write us a musical, and everyone signs off on that. Like, that's really cute.
It
that they
actually
did
is
that.
really adorable.
Yeah. I mean, Manifold really likes doing community building events. So they had an ostensible goal for conversions. Like, they wanted, like, a certain number of signups to come out of it. But I think fundamentally they wanted to create, like, some cultural lore around prediction markets and just, like, as part of the Bay Area scene.
And what do you know about the, like, business success of that show? Did it do the things they wanted it to do?
We don't know about the conversions.
We don't really know how many
but it
conversions
definitely
there were.
But Steven, the founder of Manifold, loved it.
Good.
Yeah, he loved it. Everyone
People
was
definitely
super happy.
Still talk about it.
Yeah, they still talk about it. It's still occasionally like you know, has a little. There's like a solar flare of Bet on Love content on Twitter.
Yeah, especially around Valentine's Day. That happened this year.
Yeah, and then more recently there was like the Yudkowsky thing that we mentioned.
Right.
Also,
Oh,
actually, this is from the Vibe Camp show, but our Vibe Camp dating show coined a term that emerged from Duncan's brain called Vibe Conf.
Oh my god! And that ended up in the New York Times recently.
In the New Yorker,
The
New Yorker, in the
yeah.
article about Curtis Yarvin.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
So we really enjoy. I mean, this kind of speaks to our like what you were saying about like wanting to change the audience in some way or wanting to activate them in some way. And I think like we want our shows to do that. And one of the ways you can do that is by doing things like Omega Mystery School, having people search inside and relate to others and kind of like pushing them to some interpersonal or personal edge. But another way you can do that is by like talking directly to a community, and instead of doing like a theater piece, doing a capital E event. So this is like an event for the community. And like both dating shows were events for a particular community that used the cultural tropes in that community and spoke directly to them. And I think that's, you know, I sometimes have a difficult or very picky time watching theater that doesn't feel like an event or doesn't feel like a stunt of some kind. Because I'm like, well, what's the point? There are so many voices clamoring in the void. And we've reached a state of cultural history where like everything just, I don't know. It feels like every permutation of every form has already been done in some way. And so the only things that are left and that actually matter are things that like touch directly on, like touch you in some more direct and personal way. And community is extremely personal. So if you're part of a community and there's a show happening for you, that feels extra special. It feels like you're participating in something that like is larger than yourself, but not detached from like your immediate like zone of meaning. And
yeah, and even I, coming from a much more traditional theater background, I'm starting to feel a similar way about mainstream theater, where it often feels like the main point of it is to put forward like a fashionable social message. I mean, personally, I would love to see a lot more just like straight up productions of King Lear and of Jacobean tragedies and restoration comedies, and like I would love to see just like traditional. That it feels like that would be transgressive now, to just see like traditional theater done traditionally. So it's kind of like either that or like really do something completely fresh and new that feels relevant. But it's very difficult to do that unless you have like an audience that actually is like has its own cultural tropes and things that it's like really bought into with its full heart.
Mhm.
Right, because like everything and nothing is fresh and relevant. Like everything already exists in some way. Or like, that's not literally true, but it often does feel that way. But what you personally care about already has the charge of meaning. And so if you can like play on that, I think that works.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer to the voice in my head that tells me everything's been done before. Because that's often the voice that will shout me down from doing a new project. So I'm like, there's nothing fresh about this. There's nothing new. And yet, like, the ones that survive that state in my head are the ones that I just have an intrinsic desire. I'm impelled to, like, continue them anyways. And then what comes out ends up being like, well, I feel fresh about it. And enough of an audience turned up that they show me it felt fresh to them. But like, I still couldn't point out to you once it was done why that show or that like piece of art had any purpose beyond just like it had to come out of me. Almost like it was a biological function or something.
Yeah. Sometimes it just has to come out.
Speaking of that, like voice inside, like thinking back over the projects you've done together, were there moments where you doubted whether this project was gonna happen, and like what gets you through those?
All of them.
All of them.
Every single one.
Especially the last one we did at Sundance.
Oh yeah, we almost called that one off actually, because like, well, one of our problems is that we work tirelessly with reckless ambition, to quote our own website. But it's just us two usually, or like at least doing both, like wearing like multiple hats, like production, directing, writing, stage managing, everything. Performing. And so we had a small show that we ran for people at Sundance that almost didn't happen because we just like had like no time or energy or like plan really for marketing. And it was one of the first times we had done something for kind of like a raw dogging like the public part of it.
Yeah, it's also not that easy to market at Sundance, it turns out.
Right.
They don't even like you like putting up flyers in town unless they're in like really specific like bulletin boards. Like, and they don't like you like hawking your shows on the street either. You're not really supposed to do that, but we did.
We did it anyway. I mean, we just wanted to run.
I mean, 24 hours before this show happened, and this show was like an immersive party where you're stuck the audience, are stuck on a film set with Klaus Kinski, who is a famous German mid-century actor. But anyway, we'll leave that aside for now. But it was 24 hours until the show, and we had 1 ticket sold, and we were like, maybe the show isn't... Well, Morg was like, maybe we should just cancel it. And I was like, no, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna like, we had all these like postcards with like, here's the show on them, the title, and this is where it is. And we just did the humiliating thing, and we went out and like accosted people who were waiting in line to get into the midnight movies specifically. Nice. We picked like the weird midnight movies, and we went and accosted the people in line for those. And
although we mostly targeted men, because it turns out, well, surprising no one, that it's a lot easier to approach men on the street than to approach women. So we ended up just like being like finding guys who wanted to talk to 2 cute girls and being like, hey, do you want to do something weird tomorrow night? Like, this was my pitch. Hey, do you want to do something weird tomorrow night? And they'd be like, yeah. I'd be like, okay, come to our show. And I would hand them the card, and then I would say, there's going to be live music, hot sluts, and fake cocaine. And they were like, that sounds awesome. And then some of them came.
Yeah, some of them came. But unsurprisingly, our audience of, what was it, maybe 18 or 20 people, which was as many as we wanted. But I think only 2 of them were women.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was the, like, outcome? Were you glad you went through with the show?
Yeah, it actually went really well. People really loved it. And I think in terms of interactivity and, like, what we hope for in terms of interactivity, this was, like, probably the biggest success on that particular dimension. Except for, like, my LARP, but it was kind of on the level of a LARP, really.
It didn't have characters, but you were kind of like doing something the whole time.
Yeah, there were like tasks. There were tasks, and the audience members really took things pretty far and got pretty bold. They even boiled a fake baby at one point.
Whoa.
Yeah, we had to rescue
so glad you didn't miss out on that.
Yeah.
It was really good. It was really good.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very like engaging is such a lame word.
Engaging is a lame word, but I think it's appropriate.
It was engaging, and like and people were given, we learned a lesson with this one, that it is really important to set kind of like an authoritative tone at the beginning and invite people into that magic container in a way that feels both like, in a way that clearly communicates that you can't like, that you can go pretty far, but you can't actually like fuck with the rules, and you can't fuck with the game or the performance that much. And I think we sort of intentionally invited people to break the experience. We were like, okay, like go balls to the walls.
I think we literally said that. We said like this is a play test.
Yeah, we said this was a play test. You're invited to kind of like, I forget what language we used.
Yeah, I don't know if we literally said like go ahead and try to break it.
We didn't say that, but that was the message people got.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit, it was pretty chaotic, and we were trying to emulate the chaotic environment of a film set. So that was kind of fine, diegetically, but it did make me, you know, appreciate the importance of setting a certain tone at the beginning. Because audiences want intensity. They want intensity, and they want to be able to like break things and, you know, screw with the rules a little bit. And most theater doesn't let you do that. So when theater invites you to do that, people will take the opportunity. And it's like not true. I think there's like this dominating presupposition in immersive theater right now that like you have to treat the audience very gently with kid gloves, and the point is like almost to make them have like a very soft, tender like
just make sure everybody's safe and you know.
Yeah, there's like a certain tone they're going for that I don't really know how to describe, but soft and tender are the two words that come to mind.
Do you think
gentle.
That's like the Yelp mindset? If we get one bad review, that wrecks us, or
no,
I actually don't even.
I don't think
it is that.
I think it's just like a lack of like sociopaths. And, I mean, I'm thinking of like Randy Weiner, right? Like he has like there's a lack of dark psychology among the people who do immersive theater. A lot of like I've met them.
I'm surprised to hear that. What do you mean?
Well, I've met some of them in person, and like they are lovely people, and I like them a lot. But they just have like different philosophies from like Randy Weiner, like the executive producer of
Queen
Immersive,
of the Night, and
of like Immersive, right?
And he's also the owner of The Box, the famous. What's even the word to describe The Box? Famous, controversial, sort of edgy nightclub.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's motivated by like, or he designs a lot of his shows around what he calls like dark psychology, and it's just like doing things like making people really want something by blocking it off, making something super expensive, selling super expensive tickets only to make the audience like do something kind of degrading or like shocking.
Or like he sells like he has like he had like a VIP tier for one of his experiences where like the VIP experience you got was you like help serve in the kitchen. So, like help clean up in the kitchen. Because for really, really wealthy people, that actually is kind of like their edgy, like fresh experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think like a lot of the most popular immersive theater productions of the past like 10 years or something besides Sleep No More have been directed or produced by people who just kind of have like a different aesthetic sensibility than us or than Randy Weiner. Like it's a little bit more like we want to have like a gentle, poetic, magical time. Yeah.
I felt like my basis for comparison here is Omega Mystery School, which had like a really good container on it. I felt like from the time I entered, like even before I actually got on the like guest list or whatever, I already felt like there were rules I had to like understand and work with in order to participate.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we had to speak the passphrase to get in through the veil into the pavilion. And those moments just like set me up to understand like this is a held space. People are like have eyes on how this goes, and I comply with this or I'm out. And then like I was still free to play within those bounds, and I didn't know what all the bounds were, but it didn't stop me playing at all. I got very like involved and energetically like activated by it. Yeah. And I think like if I took away those things and I didn't feel like there were eyes on the space, I would actually feel less like investing energy in it. It wouldn't make me play harder. I would be like, I don't know where
Yeah.
I belong in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think I learned this the very first time I went to see Sleep No More back in like 2012.
Mhm.
And there's a moment at the start of Sleep No More where they shuttle you all into an elevator,
Mhm.
and they take the elevator to the top floor, and you think they're just gonna let everybody out, but they only let one person out, and then the your guide like slams their arm against the door so that nobody can come out, and they like look you dead in the eyes, and they just like hit the door close button, and it's this moment of like, oh whoa, okay, they're in charge here.
They're in
Mhm.
charge.
And that was just like so, especially because that was so, immersive theater was so fresh and new at that point. It was such a striking moment for me, and I never forgot it.
Mhm.
Just how clear it made it that like we're stepping into a world where it's like their rules,
Mhm.
and I've never forgotten that. And for Omega Mystery School, we had a curtain, like you said, for people to enter, and in front of the curtain you would meet what we called a warm ritual assistant who'd be like, hi, how's your evening, blah blah blah, okay, you ready to go through the curtain, okay, yay. And then you go through the curtain, the next one, like the next ritual assistant behind the curtain was like a total bitch to you.
Yeah.
Deliberately.
Yeah.
And they were like, write your name on this stupid little name tag, and you better make sure it's beautiful, and like,
Yeah. I remember I don't know who it was, told me, make it pretty.
yeah,
And
make
I
it pretty.
that stuck in me.
Yeah. So it's just like setting up some kind of moment where there's like a I don't know, like the door slams down on you energetically in some way is pretty important
Mhm.
for having people be bought into the experience.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I also really like that there is a moment that, like, when that jars you, the person slams their hand on the door and they look you in the eye and they give you really, like, hard instructions. They have, like, just welcomed you into the story because they're no longer treating you like a customer. They're treating you like an inmate or something.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
they're in charge and you're in storyland now. And that feels like crossing a threshold before you're even inside.
Yeah, the magic
Um,
circle.
yeah.
The magic
In-
circles. We talk about that endlessly.
Yeah, tell me more about that. That's kind of new vocab to me.
Yeah, in immersive theater, the magic circle is the name for the container in which you are in the theater space.
Mhm.
So it's like when you step into the magic circle, like now you're in the show, now you're in the world, and that there needs to be some kind of moment where you kind of make it clear that the magic circle is now being formed.
Mhm.
And sometimes some shows do it in a very explicit way, and others do it in a less explicit way, just by like shifting the energy abruptly.
Yeah, and you can have magic circles inside of magic circles. So Omega Mystery School kind of had like multiple ones that you just described. Like there's the website where you solve the puzzle, there's getting the pin, there's getting to the location, there's the warm ritual assistant, the cold one, and then like the actual like space inside. And I would describe each of those as like a magic circle. It's like a sequence of concentric circles. And then where like our Kinski experience at Sundance had like no magic circle.
Yeah,
Oh,
we did-
interesting.
that was the one where we didn't quite nail the magic circle thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
it
it
was fine.
it showed. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was fine.
It showed, but it was fine.
Yeah, it was fine for a playtest. But we're adapting that experience into the Holy Mountain one, where it has a pretty similar structure and intention, and we plan to have many magic circles.
Cool.
And you can also have magic circles like within the experience. Like you enter a one-on-one with someone and you want to make sure that there's like some kind of magic circle there that communicates the new rules or like the rules for this particular kind of interaction.
Mm-hmm. I'm like looking at other art forms to see like, do they have their own version of this? Because it feels like this is especially important for like immersing people who are going to participate and carry the story with you. But do you see any like other like forms that you've made or participated in where there's a magic circle?
I think you could probably make arguments that these exist for films or for novels, more so for video games. I mean, I think the tutorial is always establishing a magic circle in some way or another. But I think it's like the more interactive the art form is, the more the magic circle becomes critical. Right?
Speaking of video games,
yeah.
I would love to talk a little, if you're willing, about Fielding's Hollow.
Oh, sure.
Which was a massive inspiration to me. Another kind of thing where after having experienced it, I was like, oh, you can do that with art. And I started writing something that was totally different from my previous work. And we're still working on that piece. But
yeah, I can't wait to see it.
I'm really excited about just like how you can demonstrate with like one experience, like a full vista of all of these creative moves. And correct me if I'm wrong, you had never played in a LARP before doing Fielding's Hollow.
So for context, Fielding's Hollow is a LARP that I wrote initially in 2022.
And for more context,
Yes.
a LARP is a live action role play.
Yeah, a live action role play. So it's like if you've ever been to a murder mystery dinner party, it's sort of like that, but like plus. Like it's like that, but a lot more complex. Where like you get a character sheet in advance, and the character sheet is quite detailed. It tells you what your character's trying to achieve and what their existing relationships are with the other characters. And then you show up to the event and you just go and you be that character for about 8 hours in this case. So Fielding's Hollow was loosely inspired by a truly, truly excellent video game called Pathologic, made by these mad genius Russians. And the aim of Pathologic, the developers called it a stress simulator, and they really wanted people to like truly, truly suffer while playing the game. They did this incredible, incredible work to subvert every conventional principle of game design and still make it like a valuable and incredible experience, but it's not anything like other video games. It's designed to make you feel powerless. And I wanted to capture a little bit of that feeling with Fielding's Hollow. So it's really an experience that is supposed to create a sense of confusion, paranoia, angst, just impending dread and fear of betrayal that could come at you from any side. So that's what it is. And I run it every fall in New England.
And as a testimonial, like, this is going to sound weird to an uninitiated listener, but I have compared notes with many different people who have played through Fielding's Hollow in different years. And we all share that, like, we're so surprised we loved it. Like, the fact that we did actually experience, like, you know, all of these negative emotions and still came away from it like, I am so glad I did that. I was so changed by it. I feel so inspired I wish I could do it again.
Yeah.
And I even recently met, I think her name is Becky. We were at a immersive theater meetup.
Oh, yeah.
And I met her through channels that were pretty much unrelated to Fielding's Hollow. And we're sitting there comparing notes about how we got into this thing. And she was, I was involved in this crazy, like, really long form LARP that was based on a video game. And my ears perked up. And I was like, was it Pathologic? And she was like, yeah. I was like, were you in Fielding's Hollow? And so yeah, funny, like, it turns out 3 of us in the room had been in Fielding's Hollow, and we were like, yeah, it's like we trauma bonded, but asynchronously or something. But there was something really cool and inexplicable about the magic of being invited to, like, suffer beautifully, as you put it in our sort of introduction to the game. To call it a game feels almost pejorative because it felt so much deeper than just a game. It was like I was involved in one of the most surreal and immersive, like, works of fiction that I've ever experienced. It was like more activating emotionally than any novel I've read, except for maybe Infinite Jest, but phenomenally activating and, like, inescapable in my memory. I dream about it to this day. I still have like moments where I'm like, oh, I should have done that with that piece of information, you know, so like it remains an unsolved mystery in my mind.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult experience. It's very difficult. But
when you first embarked on, like, making the first year of it, it seemed like, since you were not initiated into the world of LARP, like, by someone else, you didn't know what you weren't allowed to do. And that had you break a lot of rules that other, like, experienced LARPers would admonish you for. And I think you did it well. But, like, how did you know where you could go and what you could do?
Yeah, well, it was there. I had this interesting moment where I was like, maybe 2 or 3 weeks into coming up with Fielding's Hollow. And then I suddenly realized that what I was writing was a LARP. I didn't even realize that at the outset. And then I was like, oh, actually, cool. There's like a whole body of theory that I can draw from. It's actually not that voluminous, but there is some theory that you can draw on. So I did do some research and I pulled mechanics from murder mystery games that I had played and run before. But even so, I really was like, I have no idea if I can pull this off. Just none. And I don't know, it was just an incredible amount of trial and error to figure out the world, the mechanics, who the characters were and how they all interlocked in such a way that there was this like this web of tension such that everybody had things they wanted to do and like people who wanted them to achieve it and not achieve it and have that be balanced.
Mm-hmm.
So that no matter what you wanted to do, like you had a supporter, but you also had like a lot of challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean,
and for context on the scale of this thing, it's 16 people that
Yeah.
each have main character energy.
Yeah.
I think that every single person that I've talked to about it, when they read their character sheet, they were like, "Oh my god, I'm the main character of this show."
Right. That's one of the things that's really difficult about writing a LARP that I found in this process is like it's really, really hard to make it so that every single character could feel like the hero of their own story.
Mm-hmm.
And there are still a couple characters in Fielding's Hollow who aren't quite there. I think still feel like supporting characters, but with each year it's gotten more and more. I would say now like 13 or 14 out of the characters like really could absolutely conceivably be the hero of their own story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's quite difficult to do that and to set up the kinds of plot lines where it's like you kind of know where the plot is going to go as the writer, but the audience, the players, could do something really crazy with it. And every single year, something has happened that the players have come up with that was like, I never would have imagined them doing that in a million years. But in the moment they did it, I was like, of course, that makes perfect sense. It's like creative, but they actually like used the lore that I put in there and like said like, oh, well, if you're going to give us that, like, I'm going to use it this way. But yeah, I don't know, the process of like laying out just enough structure so that people don't need a script. Like people always ask me like, oh wait, okay, so do you write a script for this? Is there a script? And I'm like, no, there's no script. And when they hear the kinds of scenes that unfold, they're like, how could there not be a script? But the wild reality is that if people have enough structure and enough like counter force and opposition that's like getting in the way of what they're trying to do, this improvisation just emerges so beautifully. It doesn't even feel like improvisation anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I really felt like so immersed in the drama that like the stakes felt real at times. And so you're right, the actions that emerge out of that, they're impulses. They're not like writing a script. They're more like trying to save your own life. And it feels like very, very beautiful to look back on and see the naturalness of what people came up with in dialogue and what sort of scenes played out in these huge, like, you know, almost everyone in the story was in one room to see this thing go down, and like nobody could have written that, but everyone did. And having seen that show, I was like, this is the most challenging art I could become obsessed with, and it's inevitable that I would, because like it's so hard to scale. Like,
yeah, it is very hard to scale. It's very hard to scale. That's the whole problem with like the kind of interactivity that we're trying to do with Classics Department, is it doesn't scale very well. That's why not a lot of people do it.
Yeah, it's the money problem is impossible.
Money and
information dissemination too is a really hard one, because like in order for people to like know about Fielding's Hollow enough to want to play it, they've got to be socially involved with somebody who's played it. There's no way of like sharing the back of the jacket with somebody and having them like sign up for this like 7-hour like hellscape. It's just not it's not a selling point.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I have dreams. I have big dreams of getting Elon Musk to play one of the main characters, and I think we could get him. I think we could find him. I think we could do it. But I honestly think that if Elon Musk like played one of the main characters, like one of the central characters in Fielding's Hollow, like he would have an incredible healing experience, and
all of the questions I have about that are like spoilers, so I can't go further. But I agree he would probably really enjoy it and probably have a healing experience from it.
Yeah, but all that is to say, I mean, I do actually think that Fielding's Hollow is building up a bit of a reputation, and like people start to know, like, you know, I've been getting an inbound request here and there where people are like, oh, like I've heard about this LARP you do, can I be on the list for next year? And you know, it's like people actually will reach out and want to be a part of it. It's just only 16 spots a year.
Yeah. So. And that's the main scale problem, is that like it takes an enormous labor to like produce it, right?
Yeah.
You seemed to like have to obsess about it for the entire couple of months before the show. And that wasn't even the first run. I bet the first one was probably even heavier lift.
Yes, the first one was much heavier. But then there's this strange thing that happens where each year I think like, oh, the edits are small this year, and it's true, they're technically smaller, but it's like the problems I didn't solve last year, I didn't solve them for a reason, because they're really hard.
Yeah.
So each year is like this new spiritual initiation where I have to like dive even deeper into like what I truly care about and believe in some sense, and then bring that into these problems that haven't been solved yet in terms of the plots and the characters, and I don't know, that's been a really wild spiritual initiation that I've just undergone each year, and this year is going to be, I think, the hardest, again, because like I'm getting really to like the core of what this story truly is and what I want it to be and how I want to balance it in terms of like what faction I want to win in the end. And and that means like digging really deep on like what I care about and believe in. So
yeah. One of my challenges with making my own immersive pieces is there's always an air of secrecy around the immersion. If you told people what's going to happen, then it breaks the game. They can't actually do the discovery. How do you contend with that when you're planning shows and you want people to like dive in, but you don't want to spoil the fun?
I mean, we haven't really done repeat shows, so I think this is mostly a Fielding's Hollow question.
But even so, I mean, even with some of our other shows, like we still have to say something to people that gets them to want to come.
Like I guess like in the event copy, you have to be sort of beguiling, but not over explicatory.
Right. I mean, I think there's going to be live music, hot sluts, and fake cocaine line was a good example.
That was a really good move. Yeah. Very, very finessed.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of it is like pulling on the thread of if there's anything in it that's shocking or unique, you just kind of pull on that thread and say, here's what it's going to be like.
Oh, okay. We didn't really pull that off at all with like the Halloween play that I made last year, and it felt like a lot of people probably missed out having no idea that it was going to be as wild and weird as it was. We had an almost like normal front to a very abnormal show. Right. And looking back on that, I would definitely do it differently, but I don't know how to do it without spoiling it, because any hint that we gave people would have really blown some of the main plot points.
I mean, I think part of it is just using like the right rhetorical tricks, like using enigmatic language. Revealing like a tiny little thing is fine. You can have like 1 or 2 spoilers. I think that's fine. Well, I was almost I was about to give a spoiler almost for like the Psychomagic show, but I think that I think part of it is just about using like beguiling language and pulling on the things that make it unique. I think you can always kind of find a way. Yeah, and you can even say things like, you know, things are not as they appear. There may be secrets that take you even deeper into the world, you know, stuff like that. We've just put copy like that for a party we're working on for Halloween, actually.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I hope I get to go to that.
It'll be in Berkeley.
So, changing gears on you a little bit from marketing to kind of like the inner world of art. What would you say is the biggest like artistic miscarriage you've had, or like biggest artistic failure or like setback?
Miscarriage.
Well, one thing that this isn't exactly a miscarriage, but one thing we've both been finding in the last couple of years that's been a bit of a challenge is that like we often will get what we've started to call a shamanic sickness either before or after a show. And that could look a lot of different ways, but like it could look like falling into a depression right after a project. It could look like literally getting sick for like 4 or 5 days before a show. For Omega Mystery School, I came down with a cold like 5 or 6 days before. And my collaborator Duncan was like, Alice, this is just a shamanic sickness, and if you could just release the tension in your head, it would just go away. And I was so mad, I just screamed at him like, shut up, Duncan! Sometimes it's not a shamanic sickness. Sometimes it's just a bodily illness. and then I woke up the day of the show and I did it. I did the damn show. I was sick the whole time. My voice didn't sound right. And as soon as the show was over, that cold went away and it did not come back. It went away instantly. And I was like, wow, Duncan was right. It really was a shamanic sickness.
Yeah.
And that was actually quite metaphysically unbalancing for me.
Yeah.
But this thing we found kind of repeatedly that like it sometimes it doesn't even matter. In fact, it never matters how well the show or the event went. That is almost completely divorced from the nature of the shamanic sickness involved. It's like the shamanic sickness is like worse the more, not to be woo about it, but like the more energy you're channeling to the collective, the worse the sickness will be. So that's just something that we've both struggled with at various times.
Yeah, I think you get it more before and I get it more after.
Yeah, like it can be both.
Yeah.
Like you get the sort of like crash right after the show?
Yeah, like a huge crash. I mean, the one after like Bet on Love lasted like 9 months.
Yeah, and that
It was
kind of makes
pretty bad.
sense because you were channeling an enormous amount of energy to the collective and really holding holding a lot of the, frankly, like the shadow of the community in a way. And
Well, especially with that one, it feels like you kind of invited that role. Like
Yeah.
you're like, here, give us the shadow of your community.
right,
We're gonna
yeah,
make a
right,
game out of it.
right, definitely, definitely, and then more than that, it's like we put so much work into these things that they do just feel like our babies in a pretty significant way, and it's just, I think it's always, I don't know what the source of the shamanic illness is or what it's really about, but there's something about like it's almost like your baby's dead now or something. It's over. There's a grief. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it just becomes really difficult to even know what's going on because you're so close to it. You sort of lose any objectivity and the ability to discern like what it even looks like or the impact that it had. And then your perception becomes extremely distorted, or at least mine does. And I don't know, you just kind of start reacting to like the distorted perception instead of like you just need like a really long time to apprehend it for what it was. And if your distorted perception of it happens to be like in the negative direction, it doesn't even matter like how successful it ostensibly was. You just kind of like respond to that. And like, so I often have like self-loathing spirals after a show, even if it went well. And the last one like kind of decimated me.
Yeah.
I mean, other stuff was going on too, but yeah. Oh, I don't get like a shamanic sickness. I get like shamanic insomnia.
Yeah.
I don't sleep for days. Like
Yeah.
our rehearsal process for Bet on Love, I just like think I slept like a total of 7 hours in like the 4 days leading up to it. I didn't sleep for like 2 days straight. And then
Okay, that's
I got like
exactly the brand of mine too.
I got antipsychotics and those didn't knock me out either.
No.
Yeah.
My system is obdurate.
Yeah.
It has-
Like, give me the most like threatening drowsiness label. Like, still, it can't knock me out.
Yeah,
the
I
night
had,
before the
like,
show.
50,000 Scoville units in my mouth.
Wow.
And I was delirious. Yeah.
It's really familiar. When in the lead up to the Halloween show, I was like barely sleeping. I think I averaged like 3 hours a night for the whole week before the show. And I didn't feel tired. I felt like really wired and like overclocked the entire time. And I also noticed that like tons of muscular tension was building up, and I feel like almost in a physical, literal sense, I was just like, a conduit for way too much energy.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh, this is a whole lot like the sensation of like letting the cold in. Have you ever experienced this where you take a cold plunge or you're out in the cold and you can't fight it? If you like let it in, or you just kind of like welcome the cold, suddenly the shivering stops. Your body stops
I know
resisting
exactly what you're
it.
talking about. Yeah.
And so I like practiced that mentally. I was like, all right, let in the energy, just let it flow. And a lot of the stress turned into excitement, and it still felt like it wouldn't let me sleep. But then I didn't have the freak out about that. I was just kind of like, well, I guess I just run on 3 hours of sleep this week.
Yeah.
And the show did happen. I was completely delirious the whole time, and that didn't wreck it. Like, it was already kind of momentum.
Yeah, I mean, it has its own momentum and its own wheels.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hard to wreck it single-handedly when it's like being carried by like an organism.
Yeah.
Or Brian Smiley, best factor of one.
Right.
Our dear friend Brian Smiley, who has carried many of our shows
Yeah.
through the
On
Dark
his
Knight
back,
on
like
his-
turtles.
on his spindly shoulders.
Bless Brian Smiley. Yeah, he also saved the Halloween show
Oh,
completely.
he did also save the Halloween.
That was
Halloween
amazing.
show.
That show was called
Shout out
Thirst
to
Trap.
Brian,
and
we love
shout
you,
out to Brian.
Shout out to Brian Smiley.
Yeah, Brian.
And in this particular instance, also Becca was like MVP. Becca was both front of house and back of house MVP. That was incredible.
Yeah.
She played Death in the play, but then she also in tandem with Brian, they built the entire like app that ran the show, and it was crazy that we were going to try to run that show without an app.
Yeah.
It sounds stupid. Like, why do you need an app to run a show? And I can't spoil it because I do want to run that show again.
The app was extremely necessary.
Yes, completely necessary. And Brian asked me, like, maybe halfway through building the app, what were you going to do if you didn't have us build this? And I was like, a spreadsheet? And he laughed in my face, and I deserved it. I was like, yeah, that would have never worked.
Yeah, it would not have worked.
But yeah, Brian and Becca like saved Thirst Trap like at least 3 different ways each.
The
Yeah.
the craft cram. My ex
Mhm.
used to call this the pre-production craft cram.
Mhm.
When like 2 days before you're just working on every single prop and
Mhm.
necessary piece of
Yeah.
infrastructure.
Mhm.
Yeah, we just did a show at the Shashima Gala, which
Cool.
is, I don't even understand what it is.
It's a big gala.
Shashima is like an art foundation.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
every year they do this gala benefit where they have like 300 immersive performers just fill up their space and they turn it into like a whole immersive carnival. And then, wealthy patrons pay hundreds to thousands of dollars for tickets.
To tens of thousands.
Yeah,
Wow.
up to-
It's a very expensive
Yeah.
gala.
And then they have this organization that like supports artists in various ways. So we just did a performance there, and we're doing it again because they're actually kind of having 2 galas this year. So we did one a couple nights ago, and the next one in a few nights
On
Cool.
Thursday.
on Thursday.
Not that we can really
Not
advertise
that we can
it.
really invite
Spend
people.
$50K for a gala ticket.
Yeah.
Hey, the cheapest tickets
Oh,
are
and this is going to be released in
600.
like 2 weeks, so it'll be over by then.
Yeah, it'll be
Yeah,
over
it'll
by
be
then.
over.
Sad, but we'll have photos and
Yeah, we'll have
maybe even
photos.
video. I wonder if we could get video.
Yeah, we
That'd
could
be
probably do
amazing.
video, yeah.
Mm.
But
It
I was
sounds like
thinking
a
about it
wild
because that
number
was
of
like
collaborators,
I'm in
like-
the we were just talking about like, the pre and post production highs or lows, and
Mm.
I'm currently in the crash zone
Mm.
after that. But yeah, I had my producer hat on, and I was like just on for like 2 weeks, and I wasn't eating, and I just and I felt, oh yeah, this is what I wanted to say before, is that like another reason that state happens is that it actually feels kind of good. Like there's a part of your system that's getting off to it. Like I start feeling kind of transcendent. Like I start feeling like a hypersensual wisp of vapor. Like I don't eat, I don't sleep. I like become just like a pure kind of art machine. And it's
Yeah.
a very like limiting, but also like you get like stretched out, and so you narrow, like your being narrows, but it also gets like deeper in this like particular way, and you become like capable
Yeah.
of superhuman strength.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
feats.
There's something so beautiful and special about being like so completely absorbed with your project that it's all you can think about.
Mhm.
And like last year when I had my month before Fielding's Hollow where it was like completely consuming me and it was all I could think about, like my boyfriend at the time was like kind of mad at me for it, and I was so confused because I was like, don't you think this is awesome? Like if the places were switched, I'd be so like supportive of the fact that like, yes, sometimes you just go through these periods of like mania and obsession where it's like the only thing you're going to focus on is this like hyper specific, very ambitious like creation of this vision that's completely unique to you.
Mhm.
Like that just strikes me as like, that's so freaking cool and special and erotic and spiritual, and like it just is like one of the ultimate limit
It is the
experiences.
ultimate.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate. I think it is the high that we're all chasing, and I don't know. And so just I think the crashes and the crashes kind of come from the highs, and the highs are there because like they're beautiful and addicting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I haven't really learned how to manage. I mean, I haven't really learned how to manage my energy in this way, but I have learned how to manage some of the externalities.
Mhm.
Like my ex called me an art tyrant, because I would get in these states and then I wouldn't really understand like why he wasn't like in the state with me. And he was like, at some point he yelled at me and he was like, "You're trying to subordinate me to the vision, but it's your vision. It's not mine. You're being an art tyrant." And I was like, "You're right." And ever since that point, I've been trying to like limit the amount to which I involve my lovers.
Well, there's that, or you could just get them to buy in fully, which is what Bridget and I did when we were writing the Halloween show. We were like co-writers, co-producers, and we went through the same exact mania at the same pace. And so we're kind of like mutually like just like lifeguarding for each other
Feeding
when
off
we were
each other,
overly immersed.
yeah.
It was like, oh, by the way, I've got like all of this energy running through my body. Is that happening for you too? Yeah. When I let it happen, then like the shivering stops. Whoa, okay, I'll try that. And then the next day is like, yeah, that's working. And we stayed a little more sane because we were like, you know, tag team on that. Which is really fun. Now that I've done that once, I'm like, I just want to co-write every project with Bridget. It's great.
I know, it's nice. I mean, like, we kind of get this way.
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes.
Well, that's a thing about collaboration that I find is like really not simple to find. I've definitely tried collaborations more often than I've succeeded at them. What dynamic emerged? Did you have to work on your dynamic, or did you just have compatibility?
No, and we have an interest. I don't think we really had to work on it, and we have an interesting thing too, which I don't know. We like to work in a fairly similar way. It's like pretty much completely structureless and like quite chaotic. And we both like do this thing where we'll just like throw a bunch of ideas in a pot, like kind of madly, at least at the beginning, like. And Morg is incredible with like the amount of like research and reading she does. She just like reads everything related to the topic at hand. Not everything, but like you do read a lot and find a lot of like really, really good sources of inspiration, and those go into the pot to begin. And then I don't know, we do have a pretty good rhythm of just kind of like we never have to like explicitly define the structure. We just sort of keep going and it appears.
Yeah.
That comes from having like a very similar natural sensibility and similar overlapping notions about what art is supposed to be, not just for the audience but for the artist. Which gets back to some of what we were just talking about like these love, like the erotic love of this mania and the ambition and the like just like the overwhelming drive to create something really specific.
Yeah, I think part of the reason it feels organic is that we're like in the same like corner, on the same plane of reality about like what this is all supposed to mean for us and for other people. And it's kind of hard to explain, but like I don't know, I just feel like we get the same it. There's an it to get and we both get it.
And we both kind of love
and it has to be like great. And like we both like have a sense of sacrifice of a particular kind where we're like we'll just like do it until we die.
And it's and honestly, like to me it seems like such an obvious like given. You don't even need to explain it that like that like having some period of like suffering for your art is actually like a desirable and grand and truly great thing, but not everyone feels that way. I've learned, which is just absolutely wild to me. But we also call it the Murphy method, based on rest in peace, our dear, somewhat dear, very very old, now mostly gone friend of ours who was a musician who would just create these like totally bizarre albums, really for no one but himself, in effect. But his ethos was just like you just make it no matter what, and you fight to the death, and you make it, and you take a ton of acid, and you just make the fucking album. And we still call it the Murphy method. That just like that idea of just like completely subjecting yourself to like utter madness. Because
and if you're not doing that, then like what's the point?
That's
the point. That's what it feels like.
I agree. I've tried, like I had the couple of times in my early 20s, I had a couple of like went completely manic, did the whole project, felt like I had just like lost a limb when I finished it. It's just like the mourning and the grief and the stress and the like craziness. And then I came out of that going, all right, I'm never doing that again. I've got to like
Right.
structure
I
it a
know,
lot
I
more
know.
sanely
Yeah,
next time.
right,
And then I would do
yeah.
a sane one, and I'd completely lose interest in the middle of the project, and
Right,
it wouldn't
yeah,
finish.
yeah.
I'd be like, why didn't I finish that? Like I was
Yeah.
doing it so well. I was
That's
so
actually
structured.
a really
and
good
so,
point. That's actually a
it's
really
like,
good point.
I
yeah.
actually had to submit myself to a
Yeah.
bit of madness in order for it to be like energizing enough
Yeah.
to complete.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom and I talk about mania mommy and deadline daddy. You want like that period of mania where you're just hearkening to the muses,
Mm-hmm.
and then you want to shut that down and obey deadline daddy.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's why deadlines are so amazing.
They really-
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think we work best when we have that, when we're like,
right.
when we have a commission, when we have a deadline and like
Yeah.
a specific like place and location for the event.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we
Yeah.
will like submit our entire soul's life,
Yeah.
energy, family, and friends
Yeah.
Yes.
to that.
100%.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever finished anything without a deadline. There's
Right.
Yeah.
never been a time where I was
Right.
just like, and I
Yeah.
birthed it all of my own
Yeah.
volition. I had to get somebody to
Yeah.
hold a gun to my head.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
the deadline that is like the show must go on deadline. Like there's gonna be
Yeah.
an audience. The venue is booked. Like
Mhm.
that deadline is so much more vivifying than the
Mhm.
deadline of like you just have to send it to the editor by like this day and time. You know, like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's why
Yeah.
this theater in particular is so incredible.
Yeah,
Mhm.
if you care about your audience, and I think we care really deeply about our audience, we're always thinking about the audience, like it's always like in the back of my mind, thinking like, how are they going to react to this? How can I actually activate them? How is it going to be worth their time?
Mhm.
Like, we want to respect the audience's time. There's like
Mhm.
so much content out there,
Mhm.
and it requires money to actually run these things, and so it requires the audience's money, and like we don't want to just give them like another staid, boring, flaccid thing.
Right.
We want to give them something magical. We want them to have like a magical time.
Mm-hmm. Which means probably you're going to have to go through a crisis to like birth that magic.
Yeah, it does usually mean that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. There's
Why?
no formula because there's no formula. So every single time we have to come up with something pretty fresh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, like in the interest of respecting people's time, I feel like we've already like talked more than I would have the attention span for if I was not one of the participants. But I would love to leave the audience with like a point of connection with you. How do they find your work? How can they experience it?
www.classics-department.com.
Yes.
We are the classics department.
And you are open for commissions?
Yes.
We are extremely open for commissions.
That's
yeah.
wonderful. If I had $1 million, I would throw it at you.
Yay!
Yay.
Get
yeah.
$1 million, Heart. Go get that Go get that bag of gold.
Give me $1 million, people, so that we can get some classics department. Thank you for being here. This was an awesome first episode. I had such a good time.
Thank
you,
so
Heart.
much.
That's it. If you enjoyed this episode and want more, you can go to www.youtube.com/@therestoftheowlpodcast and subscribe. If you'd like to give your support to this production, you can donate at patreon.com/therestoftheowl. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next episode.
Fucking